Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Patience. So today we are going to be making this beautiful one off shoulder dress with asymmetric neckline. So before we get started, kindly click the subscribe button. If you have done that, let's get into it. So I'll be using this Ankara for this tutorial. This is about 3 yards and I'll be drafting on this pattern paper. So for the front piece, I'll mark my shoulder line first, and from the shoulder line I'll mark my half of my armhole measurement, which is 8 inches. After doing that, I'll mark my shoulder to bust point, which is 10.5 inches. So my shoulder to waist is actually 17 inches, but I will minus 1 inch from the shoulder to waist, that is 16 inches. And then I'll add ½ inch that I'll use to join to the lower part of the dress. So I'll be adding a waistband of 2 or 2.5 inches to this dress. So you can decide to remove 2 inches or 2.5 inches from the shoulder to waist, depends on how you want it. So this is my shoulder line, my chest line, bust line, and my waist line. So on this line, that is my shoulder line, I'll be taking half of my shoulder measurement, which is 8 inches, and I'll add half, that is 8.5 inches. So from the 8.5 inches, I'll come down by 1 inch and slant my shoulder. So after doing that, I'll bring down this 8.5 inches on the chest line and I'll connect it this way. And then I'll mark the midpoint of this line, which is 4 inches. And then from the 4 inches, I'll come in by 3/4 inch. And I'll make a slant line from the 3/4 inch to the edge of the shoulder this way. And I'll create my front armhole. So I'll be adding a dart to this dress. So I need my bust span measurement, which is the distance from one nipple to another. Mine is 8 inches, that divided by 2 is 4. But I'll add ½ inch, that is 4.5 inches. So I'll mark 4.5 inches on the waistline and the bust line. So on the bust line, I'll come down by 1 inch and I'll connect it this way. So I'll be using 1.5 inch for my dart. So I'll mark 3/4 inch on both sides and I'll create my dart. So now I'll be taking my circumference measurements. On the chest line, I'll mark 1/4 of my bust circumference, which is 10.5 inches. So I'll add ½ inch for ease, that is 11 inches, and I'll add 1 inch for sewing allowance, that is 12 inches. My waist circumference is 36 inches, divided by 4 is 9 inches. I'll add this 1.5 inch, that is 10.5 inches, and I'll add 1 inch for side seam allowance. So for the width of the neck, I'll use 5 inches. And also for the depth of the neck, I'll use 5 inches. So I'll make a curve this way. And then I'll add ½ inch on the shoulder for joining allowance. So this is the front piece, and on the fabric I'm going to mark out the dart this way, and I'm going to cut out the back piece first before I cut out one side of the off shoulder. So that is it for the front piece. So for the back piece, I've marked my 1 inch for zipper allowance and also my shoulder line. So I'll mark half of my armhole measurement, which is 8 inches. And then I'll mark my full length, which is 16.5 inches. So on the shoulder line, I'll mark half of my shoulder measurement, which is 8.5 inches. Then I'll come down by 1 inch and slant my shoulder. And I'll also mark the 8.5 inches on this line and connect it. So I'll mark the midpoint of this line also, which is 4 inches, and I'll come in by ½ inch for the back armhole. So I'll also mark my bust span measurement, which is 4.5 inches on the waistline and also on the chest line. On the chest line, I'll come down by 2 inches and I'll connect it this way. I'll make sure it's at the 4.5 inches. I'll connect it this way, and I'll be using 1 inch for my dart. So I'll mark ½ inch on both sides and create my dart. So I'll be taking my circumference measurement. My bust circumference is 42 inches divided by 4 is 10.5 inches. I added ½ inch for ease. That is 11 inches. Then I'll add 1 inch for side seam allowance. So my waist circumference is 36 inches divided by 4 is 9 inches. I'll add this 1 inch for that. That is 10 inches. So I'll mark 10 inches and I'll add 1 inch for side seam allowance. That is 11 inches. So I'll also be using 5 inches for the width of the neck, and for the depth of the neck, I'll be using 3.5 inches. That is for the back piece, and I'll make a curve this way. So to avoid zip bulge on the waistline, I'll come in by ½ inch. And from the ½ inch, I'll make a slant this way. And I'll also add ½ inch on the shoulder line for sewing allowance. So this is the back piece, and before cutting out the zip tightening, I'll be cutting out one side of the shoulder. Remember, one side is like an off shoulder. So before doing that, I'm going to fold 1 inch for the zipper allowance this way, and I'll use a maxing tape to secure it. So this is like the normal basic bodice without a zipper allowance. So this is my front piece and this is my back piece. So the next thing I'm going to do is to determine where I want the off shoulder to be, either on the left side or the right side. So I want the off shoulder to be on the left side. So I'm going to mark this as the right and this as the left. So and I want the off shoulder to be on the left side. And now I'm going to determine how deep I want the off shoulder to be. You can use 4 inches, you can use 5 inches, you can use 4.5 inches. But I'll be using 4 inches. Depends on how open you want the neck. So from the 4 inches, I'll just connect it this way. From the middle of the neckline, I'll connect it to the 4 inches this way. And I'll cut it out. So that is it for the front piece. Now to cut out my back piece, I'm also going to label this. I'll make sure good sides are facing each other this way in order to get the right and the left side. As you can see, our right side is going to be on this side and the left side is going to be on this side. So I'll just label this as left and this as right. So assuming good sides of the fabric are facing each other. So for the, I'll also come down by 4" for the off shoulder, and then I'll connect it to the middle of the neck this way, and then I'll cut it out. So this is it. Remember, if you are joining the front and the back piece, you place good sides on each other. So this is how it is going to come out. So the next thing I'm going to do is to take out the maxing tape, and I can now cut the slant line for my zipper tightening. And I'm still going to mark the 1 inch for zipper allowance. So this is how it is going to come out. Now that is it for the front and the back piece. Now I'll be cutting the off shoulder sleeve. So I'll be using an elastic at the top of the sleeve, so I'll be making a gathers, and I'll mark 1 inch for my elastic casing. So I'll mark 4.5 inches for my bicep, and the full length of the sleeve is going to be 23 inches. I'll be using 1.5 inch for hemming allowance, and I'll be adding an elastic on the hemming allowance too. So my round bicep is actually 8 inches, but I'll be adding 1, 2, 3. That is 11 inches since I'm going to be making a gathers. So I'll add 3 inches and it will be 11 inches. So I'll mark 11 inches and I'll add 1 inch for side seam allowance. So on the hemline, I'll also be marking 12 inches because I'll also be making a gathers on the hemline. So I'll mark 12 inches. So I'll make the full length 22 inches, and I'll be using 1 inch for the elastic casing. You can use 1 inch or 1.5 inch. So that is it. So on this shoulder line, I'll be using 7 inches, and I'll add 1/2 inch for sewing allowance. That's 7.5 inches. You can use 8 inches, you can use even 10 inches. It depends on how full you want the gathers to come out. So I'll connect it this way, and I'll cut it out. So I'm just going to mark about 1/2 inch on one side of the sleeve for the front armhole, since the front armhole is deeper than the back. So that is it for the off shoulder sleeve. So this is the other sleeve, and it is like the normal basic sleeve. So I have a detailed video on how to draft this. So I used the same 12 inches and I connected it to the bicep. So I wanted to use an elastic at the top of the sleeve. That was why I made the off shoulder sleeve this way. So if you don't want to use an elastic, if you just want to make it a normal sleeve, you can just mark your 4 inches this way, and you cut it out and use your lining to turn it and attach it to your dress. So that is it. I'll just go ahead and cut this on my fabric. So this is it. I've cut it out on my fabric and I've marked the dart on both sides. So I'm going to take in the dart. So I cut out a facing for the neckline. So I'm just going to align it good sides together. And I'm going to sew on 1/2 inch and I'll turn it over. So that is it for the front, and I'll do the same thing for the back. I've also marked my dart, so I'll take my dart in, and I've also cut out a facing for the back neckline. So I'm just going to align it, and I'll also sew on 1/2 inch, and I'll stop at the 1 inch for zipper allowance. So I've done that. I've taken in the dart, and I've also sewed a 1/2 inch on the neckline on the back piece, and also on the front piece I've taken in the dart, and also I've sewn the 1/2 inch for on the neckline. So the next thing I'm going to do is to join the shoulder. So I'll place good sides together this way. That's the front and the back piece, and I'll join the shoulder this way. I'll make sure I align it, and I'll pin it down and sew on 1/2 inch. So after doing that, the next thing I'm going to do is to join the side seam allowance. So I'll go ahead and pin it down, and I'll sew on the 1 inch. So I've also cut out the sleeve, that is both sleeves, and this is how it came out. This is the off-shoulder sleeve and the normal sleeve. So I'll be adding a band to the waist. So this is it. I've gone ahead to cut it out, and I used a hairstay on it. So the length of the band is 3.5 inches. So I folded 1/2 inch on both sides because I want the band to be 2.5 inches. So that is it. And the length is my waist length. That's 36 inches. So this is 2.5 inches. So I've joined the side seam together and the shoulder, and this is how it came out. So the next thing I'm going to do is to attach the band to the waist. So I'll just place good sides together this way. Now I'll use one of the 1/2 inch I folded in. I'll pin it down, and I'll be sewing on the 1/2 inch. So I've done that. So I'll be adding a gathers on the other 1/2 inch of the band. So I'll be using the remaining fabric for the gathers on the lower part. So this is about 96 inches. So you can use more, it depends on how full you want it. And the length is 26 inches. So already I have used 2 inches to hem the lower part of the dress. And I've also used the longest stitch on my sewing machine to sew on 1/2 inch all through the 96 inches. So I'm just going to gather it. The total length of the dress is 44 inches. So I've done that, I've gathered it, and I made sure it is up to my waist circumference, and I left 1/2 inch on both sides that I will use to join it. So I'm just going to place good sides together this way and pin it down on the other 1/2 inch of the band all through, and I'll make sure it is aligned, and I'll pin it down, and I'll sew on the 1/2 inch. So I've done that, as you can see. Now the next thing I'll do is to join the zipper allowance together. So I'll mark where I want my zip to stop, which is 21 inches. So I'll mark 21 inches, and from the 21 inches I'll sew to the hemline. I'll go ahead and pin it down first, and I'll sew on 1 inch down to the hemline. So I have done that, and the next thing I'll do is to attach my zip. So I'll place good side of the zip on good side of the fabric this way. I'll pin it down on the 1 inch for zipper allowance, and I'll turn it to the other side and I'll also pin it down. So when I'm stitching it, I'll ensure the band is aligned, and also the neck. So I've done that, as you can see. So the next thing I'm going to do is to finish up the neckline, and I'll be sewing on top of the zip. So I'll pin it down this way and I'll finish up the neckline. So I've done that, and I also sew close to the zipper teeth, that is the facing. I sew close to the zipper teeth on both sides. And I'll just pull it out this way. So that is it. So after doing that, I'll just iron a hemming gum on the facing. So after doing that, I'll be attaching the sleeve. So I'll ensure good sides are together this way. So I'll align it on this part and I'll pin it down. So of course the sleeve will not align because there will be excess on the sleeve. So all you need to do is just to pleat it a bit and align the shoulders. So in case you have excess, just pleat it, and that is it. So I'll just sew on 1/2 inch round the sleeve, and this is how it's going to come out. So I've also hemmed the 1 inch for hemming allowance, and I left 1 inch that I will use to pass my elastic. So I've attached the sleeve, and this is how it came out. So this is the off shoulder sleeve. I've gone ahead to hem the lower part and also the upper part for the elastic casing. So the length of the elastic I'm using is 7 inches. You can use 6 inches for a smaller size and 8 inches for a bigger size, depends on how you want it. So I'm just going to pass the elastic through on the casing. So when I get to the edge of the elastic, I'm going to stitch it. I'll stitch the edge just to secure it. I'll go ahead and do that. So I've done that, and I'll continue passing the elastic. And when I get to the edge on the other side of the elastic, I'll as well stitch it just to secure it. I've done that. So this is how it came out. So now I'm going to attach my sleeve. So I'm just going to align this part together and I'll pin it down, and if there's any excess I'll just plait it. So this is how it is going to come out. I'll go ahead and sew on 1/2 inch. So I've done that. I've attached the other sleeve, and this is how beautiful it came out. And I've also attached an elastic on the wrist. I left 1 inch opening that I'll pass the elastic through, and after passing it through I stitched back the 1 inch. So did the same thing on the other sleeve, because the sleeve is like a balloon sleeve. So that is it, guys. I'm going to put this on the mannequin to show you guys how it came out. So guys, kindly give this video a thumbs up, and also click the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell to be updated when I upload a new video. Thank you guys for watching. Bye.